Kick in the door, you running with war. What's going on, world, and welcome inside to yet another edition of Open Run, presented to you by War Media. My name is Gabriel Wilkins, and I'm coming back at you yet once again, besides my fellow co-host, senior NBA writer for War, and Bulls insider beside Eugene McIntosh and Terrence Tomlin at the Bigs with my brother Josh Hicks. What's been up with you, man?
You tell me, when you coming in with this emphatic intro talking about, if we can run, you're running with war. I'm like, oh, dang, it's a different vibe in this year. Okay, I mess with it. But outside of that, man, I'm good. It's always a pleasure to hop on the mic with you.
For sure, man. That's great to hear. In this week's edition of Open Run, we will take out the time to discuss the incredible play as of late from an Eastern Conference team in the city of brotherly love, as well as a young upstart squad out in the Western Conference who, as of this recording, surprisingly stands only a game and a half behind another squad, which we'll also take some time to talk about as well later on in the show. But before we take out the time to highlight the following clubs and go about discussing a series of other squads in the West, among another trio of teams in part 2 of our current buyers and sellers series, we want to take some time to give out some kudos this week to those who stood out over the past several days and beyond in our Hoops shout out segment. Special Hoops shout outs in this week's episode go out to the NBA's leading rebounder and big man Domantas Sabonis of the Sacramento Kings, as the center out of Gonzaga posted a triple-double stat line with 18.5 points, 14.3 rebounds to go alongside of 10.3 assists per game through 4 contests this past week, in which all resulted in wins for Sacramento en route to the 2-time All-Star, locking up Western Conference Player of the Week honors, in addition to Boston Celtics All-Star forward Jason Tatum, who became not only the 4th player in NBA history to put up 50-plus points on MLK Day during Boston's 130-118 road win against the Charlotte Hornets, but also surpassed Hall of Fame legend and Celtics icon Larry Bird for the most 50-plus point games in Celtics franchise history, with the 5th 50-plus outing of his career to date. Mind you, he's only 24 years old and already has broken that record. Can't imagine what that record is going to be when it's all said and done with the way these 50 balls been going this year across the league, as well as former Kentucky product and New York Knicks power forward Julius Randle, who poured in a game-high 42 points and 15 rebounds to help New York defeat the Pistons in Detroit this past weekend, all the while making some history of his own along the way with his performance, as Randle became the first Knick player since the great Patrick Ewing in 1996 to drop 40-plus points and 15-plus rebounds in a single game. And last but not least, the San Antonio Spurs, who made a grand return to their former home in the Alamo Dome for the first time in nearly 21 years in commemoration of the franchise's 50th anniversary to take on the defending champion Golden State Warriors and set a new NBA single game attendance record in the process. Is 68,323 fans were on hand to witness the game up close in person last week. Former Spurs greats such as the Hall of Fame center David Robinson, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, and Sean Elliott were all on hand for the festivities, in which shattered the previous record of the 62,046 who gathered to witness Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls square off against the Atlanta Hawks at the old Georgia Dome on March 27th, 1998. So with all of that said, Josh, I got to ask you, as always, starting out this week's show, who are some players, teams, or even, news or storylines that managed to either catch your eye or stand out the most to you over the last several days across this hoops landscape?
First off, obviously, you got to give shout out to the San Antonio Spurs and the NBA for pulling off what they did at the Alamo Dome.
Yeah.
Let's be serious, though. 62,000 people. Did you see those pictures of how far away people were from the actual court itself? You need binoculars. I'm not going to the game.
I saw that.
I can't do that. I can't do that, bro. I'm gonna want to scope. forget the game. I want to just scope and walk around. That's the case because I can't see anything. So I just would not do that. But hey, 62,000 plus people decided to make efforts to be part of this historic event. So shout out to those 62,000 people. As an NBA fan, I probably would want to attend, but I pray to God I get a closer seat than what I saw with those pictures because that was.
I know what you're talking about too, because it was some people that were seated all the way like in the nosebleeds higher up, where like they were behind the corner scoreboards and they could barely see anything. I don't know who paid for those seats, but whoever did, God bless them, because they just were pretty much in the building. I don't know how they were able to enjoy the experience, but it was 68,323 on hand. They surpassed the record, which was formerly 62,046 when the Bulls went to Atlanta to square off against the Hawks at the old Georgia Dome. I thought that was pretty cool, though, and unique. Although the sightlines, it brought back old memories of when I was a kid. Like, it was always tough, like watching those games, even as a spectator at home, because them sightlines is just so bad.
Yeah, I can't do it. So kudos to the 68,000 people that chose to do it.
Yeah.
Much facts to them. But I'm going to say, since outside of all the names you've mentioned, especially with Jason Tatum being the big one, 51 piece against the Charlotte Hornets, against MJ's team, I got to go with Nikola Vucevic and what he did against the Warriors.
Okay.
For the 3-point, 13 rebound, double-double. You know, when you talk about the Bulls this season, it's always been around where's Vooch and being MIA for the most part, or quite frankly, him not being aggressive enough offensively to help put the Bulls in the position they need to win. Well, Nikola Vucevic, especially since DeMar DeRozan has been out, stepped up in major ways and let people know I was an all-star at one point. I actually know how to play the game that well to where I was getting good money, max money to represent a franchise in an all-star game and potential playoff expectations when I was the main guy. And that's why you brought me here. So for him to have that type of game in the way that he did it, all parts of the floor, and really killed it on the inside, but he had the outside shot going, and he dropped 4 assists as well. So he was actually being a willing passer at the same time. It was a good statement game for Vooch, and for him to show the league that, hey, Vooch, even though I'm in a different role, Vooch can still give you big time numbers if you put me in positions to do so. And that's a big statement, especially since, for many Bulls fans, most likely, you want to see, especially moving forward, you're going to need that type of play. But at the same time, if you're also looking at people like us that spectate the game, you could be thinking that's a good good game for him to pull up that draft stock a little bit. They can help get rid of him a little bit when that time comes their trade deadline. So there's but overall for the Bulls, they need that, especially since the fearless leader DeMar DeRozan is out, and he showed the world again why he's an all-star, a multi-year all-star, and I'm happy that he was able to have that game, considering that's his first 40-point game, and that's actually he matched his season high or career high. Ever since he played in the league, but it's his first 40-point game since he's been a Bull. So that is something that has to feel good to Nikola, especially before they play the Detroit Pistons over in Paris this Thursday.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, that's the Bulls' first international trip since 1997 in France, back when they were getting ready to go for a three-peat going into that 97-98 campaign. So that's pretty cool to see. I got to admit, seeing that was pretty impressive, even though I know Nikola Vucevic is capable of doing that. To see him actually do that and put that game together against who he put it up against as well in the defending champion Golden State Warriors, you got to tip your cap off to him. Kind of wonder if he was auditioning for him a little bit, if they do need some help in the material, but as you said, that was a game that they needed. And I mean, I know DeMar has been reported to be playing this week in Paris against the Pistons. However, if Vucevic gonna keep playing like that, I mean, you might want to tell DeMar sit a couple more games, because I haven't seen him play like that in a while. But for me, as far as the things that stood out to me the most, I could easily highlight LeBron James, becoming only the second player in the history of the NBA to ever reach the 38,000 point plateau and only stands just 315 points shy when it comes to surpassing Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for most career points all time by a player as of this recording. I mean, he's averaging nearly 30 a night on 51% shooting from the field, still getting to the line around 6 times a night. If you asked him, he'd probably tell you the number should be higher. But to see a player who is the elder statesman of the game, in which many wondered how he would fare with all of the lights on him from the day he entered the league just 20 years ago, continue to go about exhibiting what he's done on a night-to-night basis, has been nothing short of phenomenal, as his legacy within this game will ever stand the test of time. But there have been two guys this week whose play has stood out to me the most over the last several days, starting with a guy who we discussed last week when it came to our frustrations as to why this guy wasn't among the top 10 of the first return of all-star fan voting among guards in the East, and still not, for reasons unknown to me, as well as Josh, I believe, as the second return just came out last week, and that's Jalen Brunson, man. The reigning Eastern Conference Player of the Week, New York's Knicks guard, posted a 34-5-5 line through a 4-game stretch on the way to lead New York to a 3-1 record last week. He's averaging over 30 points per game in his last 10 outings, and he's really proven to be the spark plug and the go-to scorer that this Knicks team needs him to be in clutch minutes time and time again. He's been that steady floor general along the way that this team missed to a great degree last year when they were attempting to make it to the playoffs in back-to-back seasons for the first time dating back to the early days of the Carmelo Anthony era and NYC. He's tied with De'Aaron Fox, as I have it here, for number 2 in clutch points with 99 on the year. Only DeMar DeRozan has more this season. Mind you, he's only committed 3 turnovers in these games when the scoring margin is within 5 points or less in the final 5 minutes or less in the game. That's saying something, especially when you consider how high his usage rate is. And while, you could say that he should pass the ball a little bit more in these situations, I've heard a lot of criticism about that. He has a case on why he shouldn't. He's shooting 52% from the floor, 50% from deep in clutch minutes for a Knicks team that has benefited greatly from his ability to make quick decisions on the fly and take over late in ball games. I mean, some of you Bulls faithful who listen to our show, including Alex Caruso, who got a firsthand lesson himself, they know what I'm talking about firsthand. As they've been one of the many victims to Brunson's prowess and high IQ late in games this season, as we know. He's using his speed and quickness to get into the body of defenders who try to step out and defend him on that perimeter, driving inside the lane and looking to score either with the floater game or getting straight to the cup. He's getting to the free throw line at a career high clip. He's shooting about 5 free throws a night, hitting 85% of them, which I also believe is a career best. And he got a game in the post too right now. Turnaround fadeaways that he's using on smaller guards. And, if you double him, he's setting up Emmanuel Quickly or Julius Randle for shots. I know Julius Randle has had an all-star worthy campaign himself, but without Jalen Brunson, I don't know where this Knicks team is right now. And last but not least, I got to give a shout out to this rookie, man. A rookie who I thought the Bulls should have had on their draft board. A rookie who the Bulls passed up. And he ended up going 4 picks later after Dalen Terry. And that's the number 22 pick in last year's draft, Walker Kessler, Jazz rookie center. I call him the Ranger, young big man out of Auburn. He's done an incredible job, man, just displaying an ability to not only just protect the rim as a shot blocker, but also as an all-around defender. And this was the guy that was named the Naismith Defensive Player of the Year in college just a season ago prior to entering the draft. And he's really cementing himself as a guy in the league that you don't want to drive on. And as a guy that can alter shots, he's out there calling coverages on the floor, which is positive to see. And you don't see that from rookies most often, considering the fact that these guys are going up against players who are oftentimes playing with more physicality and at an incredibly much faster pace than they're accustomed to. As he's coming outside even and sometimes moving his feet to defend guards, which is incredible, man. And he's making good things happen on the floor. And he don't even need a play to get called for him in order to score. He's getting tip ins, put back dunks, rebounds, converting a lot of second chance buckets for Utah, all the while even creating some opportunities just off rebounds and kicking it out to shooters. This man just had a 20-20 game against the Minnesota Timberwolves, the same team that held his draft rights and traded him to Utah is part of the Rudy Gobert trade. And he's one of only 3 rookies in the last 20 years to do that, with the last one being Gordy Jane in 2014. And oh, by the way, the last rookie to post a 20-plus point, 20-plus rebound game, all the while shooting at least 65% or better from the field, you got to go back 30 years to Alonzo Mourning to find another guy that's done that. And he coming off of the bench, but he's been starting over the last 3 games, and he's averaging a double-double in the 10 games in which he started this season, all the while averaging 13.5 points, 13.2 rebounds, and 3 blocks per game over the last 4 games for the Jazz in games in which he's been called upon to start in the absence of Lauri Markkanen and Kelly Olynyk due to injury, man. So when I see what I'm seeing from this guy right now, it's been nothing short of special. He became the first rookie since Thurl Bailey in Jazz history to record 7 blocks in a game, which he did last week. Followed that up going 7 for 7 with a double-double on Joel Embiid, albeit in a close loss, before he put up the 2020 game. Man, this dude is becoming a player where it's going to become hard for Will Hardy to make a case for him not being in the starting lineup. His motor is that good, and his presence has been that valuable for a Jazz team that finds itself within the thick of the play-in race, to many people's surprise, after considering the fact that they gave up not only Gobert, but Donovan Mitchell this past summer.
Yeah, Kessler is a very interesting situation because of the fact that we always talk about how where players play at, the situations matter. Right?
Yeah.
And Utah Jazz's situation is very young, less expectations, very free-for-all, considering this is the first year of a rebuild, right? So because of that, I think it just opened the door for guys like Kessler, for guys like Lauri Markkanen to just come in and just say, yo, let's just do what we do. And by doing that, they're excelling at such a rate where, like you said, they're not just only fighting for playoff positioning, but they're shocking and beating expectations of what it means to actually be effective good players and improving that player talent over time. Now you're giving the Utah Jazz an opportunity to think about, okay, like you said, Coach Hardy got to make decisions on whether he should be starting more or not. But it goes further than that. It goes into, okay, if we continue to rebuild, who else can we be buyers per se to help push this and speed up this process? Or at the same time, ride the season out and that's just the rookie year. Imagine what it's going to be the next year when they have more playing time under the belt. They actually have a full offseason together to work on their games and excel in different rates. Kessler being a rookie, he's probably going to finish at this rate all rookie team.
He got to be.
Yeah.
Ain't no doubt about it. First team all rookie. I got more numbers for you, bro. He leading all rookies in block shots with 87 swats thus far this season. And he coming off the bench primarily. The only player that comes close to that in his class is Christian Koloko of the Toronto Raptors with 45. And he ranks only behind Detroit's Jalen Duren in total rebounds, as well as rebounds per game among rookies with 7.2 per game. And he's doing this all the while playing under 20 minutes a night through his first 44 contests in the NBA. If he ain't first team all rookie, I don't know who is.
That's facts, man. And the fact that is in Utah with a rising all-star and Lauri Markkanen. Yes, I said all-star because Lauri Markkanen should deserve to be in the all-star game this year. It's
We agree.
incredible what he's done. So to have all that take place, it puts Utah in a unique bind, considering you still have quality, talented veteran players that you're technically trying to get rid of so you can do an official rebuild, but you're putting yourself in a position where, you know what, as much as you want to, sell per se, when we talk about the buyer and sellers marketing and removing those veteran players so that way you can kind of start a full rebuild, you also got to wonder, you know what, maybe because they're playing so well, do we actually stick to the schedule, or do we adjust it a little bit and see if we can get a playoff run? Make some noise so that way when you show the league, if you do make the playoff, especially if you're not just winning a play-in, but actually go further into the first round, maybe even go past the first round. Now you're talking. Now you're sending a message to the league saying that Utah really ain't no rebuild team. We kind of ready right now. And that could be the next thing when it comes to bringing other quality players back in, which is going to be surprising considering we did not expect this since they got rid of their two best players that the franchise has had in this decade.
Yeah, that's a great assessment. But one thing I'll say in regards to, Kessler, like specifically, they gotta find a way to get him more minutes. If he's doing this in under 20 minutes a game, I can only imagine what he could do if you give him 25 to 30, 32 consistently. You do that, the sky's the limit. Because the way I see it, Kelly Olynyk's days in Salt Lake City are numbered.
Mm-hmm.
Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler, they looking like the premier 4-5 combination out in Utah. You get a quality wing beside them, which they might already have at O'Shea Abachi right now, who's been putting together some stellar minutes off the bench for the Jazz over these last several outings. Could really have some with that young core right beside Colin Sexton leading the way, because the transition is coming. And whether or not they find a way into the playoffs or not, future sure as hell looking bright. But I want to segue away from the players and storylines that caught our eyes the most to discussing a team that lies in the city we're based out of, and a franchise my running mate Josh has had the time to closely follow throughout this season, and that's the Chicago Bulls, who, as of our recording, find themselves in the same spot as they did last week in the Eastern Conference standings, sitting in the 10th and final spot of the play-in picture, except this time tied with the Toronto Raptors as we highlight them, despite having a very tough week after capturing 8 wins in their last 11 games prior to entering it, as the Bulls failed to make any upward ground at all after suffering a pair of losses against the Boston Celtics and Washington Wizards in rough fashion on the road, who were without the services of Kristaps Porzingis and Bradley Beal, while allowing the Oklahoma City Thunder to annihilate them on their own home floor this past weekend. Yet, in typical Bulls fashion, this season would show up against the Golden State Warriors to close out the week, as the team who would get beat by 14 points by the Thunder would return the same favor against the champs in their lone visit this season to the UC, led behind, as we spoke on earlier in the show, Nikola Vucevic, 43 point, 13 rebound, and 4 assists day, and Zach LaVine, who chipped in with 27 points of his own in the absence of DeMar DeRozan for the third straight game due to a strained right quad. Bulls are currently overseas out in France, getting set to take on the Detroit Pistons as part of the NBA Paris games in their lone game of the week, as recent reports have indicated that DeRozan is expected to return for the following contest. So we currently passed the halfway point of the season, Josh. And while the Bulls have managed to fare pretty well against upper echelon teams in the Eastern Conference, but also across the NBA as a whole, you could say, they haven't found a way to take care of those on the outside looking in, a trend that is the reverse opposite of what transpired a season ago. What do you make of that? And what do you think, beyond any personnel moves, must be done to change it in time for the Bulls to make a late push based not only on your own given insight, but what you've heard being inside the locker room. As I saw you got a chance to catch up with Zach LaVine as well as Kobe White to talk with them following their win against Golden State.
Yeah, the trend that this Bulls team continues to go through is, in a lot of ways, lack of effort and respect on certain, especially on the defensive end of the floor. That's just pretty much where it starts. They're not that good of a defensive team as they once were before. When you look at the defensive rating right now, they started off the season at the top 10 team, more on the 10, more at the number like 9-10 slot. Now they're currently sitting at 18 with a net rating of 113. So their defense has slid drastically, and on top of that, you have no identity offensively. That's still an issue because when you have situations where you rely so much on DeMar DeRozan, it can only take you so far. And on top of that, it stagnates your offense. When the Bulls, the formula for the Bulls has always been the same. When you get the ball to Nikola Vucevic in the post, it doesn't matter if he scores. It doesn't matter. Once he gets the ball in the post, the offense flows better. This inside-out game is the offense that the Bulls need to consistently run, but they don't want to consistently run that throughout the games. And when they go away from it, it's like a bad habit. You break that. You try to do good. You're on the pace to do good. You break the bad habit. You don't automatically just go back and be like, okay, that was just one mistake, and then I'm back on a good path. No, you dip. That's just the reality. You dip. They dip throughout the games consistently. They go through bad stretches where it's like, okay, we're gonna get away from Vooch for a while. We're gonna start doing isolation basketball. We're gonna start doing our own thing, and that is what kills the Bulls. And you don't have that type of direction because the reality is you don't have a true point guard. You don't have someone that can settle the team down and say, hey, no, we're going to run this, put them in a position they need to run, and let the offense flow. That's what Lonzo Ball brought to this team on the offensive end. He brought stability. He brought high IQ. And he brought an intensity that forced the other star players on this Bulls roster to run their offense in such a way. Billy Donovan was a genius when you have Lonzo Ball at the point guard position because it changed everything. But you don't have that right now. Ayo is still learning how to be a point guard. Even though he can play, he's still learning to be a point guard. Kobe White is not a point guard. He's a combo guard. He's someone that can score the ball, but he can't facilitate at the rate that an Ayo or a Lonzo Ball can. At moments they played Alex Caruso point guard. I hate to be honest with you. Alex Caruso ain't no point guard. He's not. So because of the fact that you have such limited point guard play, that drastically impacts how people can get the ball, especially guys like Vucevic, who's not a very demanding type of person when it comes to the offensive end. He plays in the flow of an offense. So to be able to see him have the performances that he did against the Golden State Warriors, it's like, well, God, where has that been? Because it's always been there. He just never played to that level because, quite frankly, the offense never allowed him to do so. So one thing that outside of that, though, I will say this. Zach LaVine is slowly but surely growing his playmaking skills. And I asked him about that after the game against the Warriors. And pretty much he was saying was, I kind of have, in his own way, I don't really have a choice but to do that. Because one, we don't really have a point guard like that. But two, he said third and fourth quarters, teams are double teaming me. I have no choice but to look for my other teammates and put them in position to score. So that way, they can get going when I can't get going in the way that I want to myself. So he understands the importance of playmaking. He's been averaging 5 assists a game ever since the later part of December, going into the new year. So he's improved his playmaking skills. But there's also one caveat to this thing. It's the reality of Zach LaVine. He's not your 1A. I mean, he's not your number one guy. This is the perfect opportunity that the Bulls had to see, okay, we signed a max player. DeMar DeRozan is out. Let's see what you do. And he plays like he normally plays, which is good numbers, very good numbers. But that leadership component, that taking that team to the next level, that mentality of, okay, I am the guy on this team. Everybody comes on my back and we're going to push this thing forward. It's not there yet. Does it have a chance? Yeah, but it's not there yet. And that's why the Bulls have been losing these games, because they don't have Zach LaVine taking on what a DeMar DeRozan would do and taking that team to that extra step. And I think he's learning some of that. The team is learning some of that. And it's going to be a little bit of an uphill battle till that time comes, because this is the first time, in all honesty, Zach LaVine actually has heavy responsibility on him. And he's learning what that looks like as a max player. So this is a grind out season for him, but also for the Bulls in finding out not just an identity, but when it comes to certain expectations, can you actually live up to those expectations on any given night? And that's something that the Bulls have struggled ever since the season began.
Yeah, for me, I think the Bulls have an identity offensively. I just think that they may not have the proper personnel to execute it. And their identity is, when they're at their best, is get the rebound and push it up the floor and seek to get easy scoring chances. Because in half court, unless if you're able to play through DeMar, which over the last 3 games they haven't been, well, everything just bottoms out. And that's something that they have to work on. But at this point, it's kind of like the late Dennis Green said, they are who we thought they were. Well, to reverse that, they are who they already are. They weren't a good half-court team last year. They're not a good half-court team this year. A lot of that is due to the personnel that they have on this team, and mostly consistent of young guys, and not having that true point guard, as you alluded to, with Lonzo Ball out of the mix. Even though, as of late, he's shown some positive signs of progression from his injury with being able to dunk and so forth, even though he's yet to showcase any ability to cut or run, as it really doesn't look like he's going to come back at all this year, based off of what I've heard and seen. Right. And maybe you could clarify that if I'm wrong or whatever, but that's what it is. It sounds like coming out the Advocate Center. But with all of that said, they have an identity, but I agree with you, like on the defensive end, like the rotations are a step too slow. And it's a lot of inconsistencies when it comes to effort. Mm-hmm. You brought it up last week when we talked about the Bulls and saying that you never know what team you're going to get on a night-by-night, game-by-game basis. Well, we saw that last week against Washington, where they had a double-digit lead. Then the third quarter come around. Kristaps Porzingis and Bradley Beal, Washington's top 2 options on the floor on most nights, they not playing. But you letting Anthony Gill, no disrespect, NBA player, he earned his money, but you letting him have a field day on you. On top of that, you giving up 30-plus points on the defensive end in a single quarter. And you turn a double-digit lead into a double-digit deficit. The Bulls have to understand that basketball is not a 12-minute game. It's not a 24-minute game. It's not a 36-minute game. It's a 48-minute game. And you got to play all of it if you want to win. And if you're not going to do the little things that are necessary for you to win games, such as winning the 50-50 battles on the boards, winning the rebounding numbers, and winning in the first quarter, and setting the tone each and every single night, it's going to be hard for you to win games consistently. Because when you're playing from behind as much as the Bulls are in a lot of these games and having to expend so much energy coming back night in and night out, you know what happens when it gets to those final 5 minutes? You get tired. You start settling for shots. We see it with the Los Angeles Lakers some nights. They got the same problem.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? They got something in common. They both under 500. Bulls fighting for play-in positioning. Lakers doing the exact same. Tell me it don't add up. It's the simple principles and the attention to detail that's being lost. Do I believe that Billy Donovan is trying to translate that to this group? Yeah. But is the group getting the memo? No. And I don't know whether or not if that's Billy's fault fully. However, he has to bear some of the blame, but the players do as well. And at some point, if you exclude the personnel moves that need to be made prior to the deadline, the only way I feel as though they can change it is by bringing the same energy in which they bring when the top teams come into town. No, when the bottom feeders do. You got to do that. You know, like I'm still perplexed by the fact that they lost to a Houston team that only has 10 wins this season.
Mm-hmm.
In spite of the young talent that they have. They shot the lights out against them. And that defense, or the effort that they displayed on defense in that game and many games to follow, for the most part, been subpar.
Yeah, man, you hit all the right spots. As far as what I've heard regarding Lonzo Ball, you know, Bulls are still optimistic that he's progressing. They're optimistic that progress is being made, and let's put it this way: they're going to publicly say they want him back. They're not going to cut him off saying that he's not coming. But let's be serious. It's not looking good that he's coming back. It's no guarantee that he's coming back at all. Matter of fact, you might as well play the rest of the season like you're not going to have him. And I think that's the problem that the Bulls are having. That's one of the problems, because you're constantly putting out this belief that, Lonzo Ball's going to come back. He's going to come back. He's going to help fix a lot of these issues. When, quite frankly, Lonzo Ball's not on the right track to play this season. That's just the reality. And two, even if he does come back, he's not going to play like the Lonzo Ball of old right away. You're talking about a guy that comes on the court and hasn't played basketball in over a year. That's going to take time for that person to get off the rust. It's going to take time for him to get his timing together. And when you talk about how bad defensively the team is, imagine that much pressure he has to play defending the perimeter, being the go-to person at the point guard, trying to push the transition game. And then whenever you have situations where one of your three main guys ain't hitting it, guess what's the number 4 option? Lonzo Ball. You got to make sure he's shooting and hitting the shots, which is not a guarantee starting off the season when he does come back. So it's going to be a lot of pressure on Lonzo Ball if he does choose to play this season. And if so, he has to be able to handle what the Bulls are pretty much, the situation the Bulls are pretty much getting him to. Because the reality is the Bulls are treating him like he's the savior right now. And they're not planning to make any moves. They're not planning to make any moves at this trade deadline. They're so they really are sticking to what they said they were going to do when it comes to, this is the core that we have. We trust the core. We're going to ride this core out. But my counter position to that would be, but you also said in the beginning of the season that Michael Reinsdorf gave you full green light on whatever money you need in order to make the best moves to improve this roster. So if the record and the play is telling me that, quite frankly, this roster's not working, why are we so hellbound in keeping the core? Why are we so hellbound in keeping the roster? Something got to give if you want to go back to the playoffs and go deeper than the first round, which is something you adamantly have said since the beginning of the season. Something has to give. Otherwise, guess what? You're going to play the rest of the season hoping and praying that a change does happen within this current core and the Bulls make the playoffs. But when you look at even when you go on that type of a prayer, which I'm not counting it out. We've seen a lot more crazy things happen in the league. So it can happen. But let's be serious. The Bulls are sitting 10th in the East. If they make it through the play-in, 9 out of 10, they're going to have to play either Boston, Brooklyn, or Milwaukee. You're getting swept in the first round. That's just reality. You might get one game in, maybe two, depending on the team. But 9 out of 10, you're not going to win the series. So you just accomplished, at the best scenario possible, what you just did last season with the same core. What are you going to do moving forward? Like, that's the thing. That's what gets me with the Bulls team. You see that they're sticking to what they're saying, which is a lot better than previous regime. You know, you can trust them from that regard. But trusting in the fact that this is the core that's going to get you to the next level at this current rate, with the personnel that's there, you can't trust that. So because of that, you have to question now at this point. You talk about Billy Donovan. It goes past Billy Donovan at this point. That's Acme. That's front office. That's front office looking and seeing that, okay, Billy Donovan is constantly saying all the right things in the press conferences. I'm pretty sure he's doing these things in the practices. Something's not clicking. So you got to work with Billy to figure out what it is. And you already started that by saying that you had meetings with DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine on separate occasions, more than once, to see what the issue is.
Right.
So since you did that, why hasn't anything been done when you know and see, then you clearly see, you know, on the court, something's not right.
That's well said. They definitely got some decisions to make. And the way I see it, if they're going to stand pat, like they've been saying, and not even try to make a small move, to put it nicely and short and sweet, it's going to be very, very interesting to see how all of this plays out. But I want to move the show along from the squad and the go to talk about an Eastern Conference foe in which the Bulls actually defeated a couple of weeks ago and once found themselves sitting at 500 prior to the holidays. Now, after winning 15 out of their last 19 games, now stand only a half a game behind the Nets for the number 2 seed in the East as of this recording, in the Philadelphia 76ers, who currently stand at 27-16 record-wise this season and sit 4th overall in the Eastern Conference, all the while boasting a 6-2 record in their last 8 games, as Joel Embiid is averaging nearly 35 points and 10 rebounds per game over this time span, besides James Harden, who has returned to the fold, averaging a double-double line of his own, posting 23 points and nearly 12 assists per game with 7 rebounds. For me, Josh, the Sixers' recent turnaround and what's led to it is rather simple. It's Harden and Embiid having managed to establish a chemistry working alongside of one another after having a full training camp to not only just work beside one another, but getting enough game action and game reps in to determine where they like to operate the most and can do so the most effectively. And as a result, I believe it's translating to wins because they're buying into the program. There was a time when Joel Embiid wasn't used to operating as the role man out of a pick and roll set because he didn't have a point guard who was serviceable enough to do that with consistently, who was also a threat where if you dropped hard enough could lift up and knock down a 3, be it off of a step back created or just a simple 3 that was wide open. Well, we're starting to see him get a bit more comfortable doing that now, besides Harden operating at the 1. On top of that, we seeing Harden be more of a willing passer, and he's uncovering his spots in regards to when and where to attack and make things happen as a scorer. And this was most prevalent to me the most just watching them on the weekend against Utah out of Salt Lake City, man, because he reeled off a stretch where he scored 16 straight in a row for Philadelphia. And I'm talking about Harden in that fourth quarter during the middle of that ball game. And then when they were down by one in clutch time, he orchestrated a ball screen action with Embiid. He had him set a screen, hit him with a behind the back pass, drew the double team to set up Embiid with a one-on-one matchup against Walker Kessler, who we just were talking about earlier. Now, he contested it well, but not enough. He created enough space on a mid-range fadeaway to seal the game for Philadelphia, and Embiid did, which proved to be the game-winning shot. And this is an action that I think they're going to go to a lot more come playoff time as the game slows down, as the Sixers offense on most nights is going to go according to how them two operate. Montrezl Harrell has played well as of late off the bench. They've gotten help from Tyrese Maxey, as we know. He came off of the bench in their win against the Lakers, if I'm not mistaken. And they've kind of trying to figure out whether or not to start him or bring him off the bench as a sixth man. But right now, I think a lot of the success has been predicated upon the two-man game in which Harden and Embiid have been able to generate. And as a result, they've gone from being 26 overall in offensive efficiency when Harden was out in the month of November to 6th last month, and now 5th as of this recording in the month of January.
Man, I don't even need. I'm just gonna put the icing on the cake for this one because you hit all the points. I'm gonna put a little icing on the cake for this one.
Yeah, what's led to the turnaround?
Well, I think a healthy James Harden. Because, like you mentioned, Harden was out for a while due to injury, and I think he's now got his swagger back. He got that pop in him. He got back in him what made James Harden James Harden.
Okay.
Combine that with a Joel Embiid, who we all know is the freakish player that he is, averaging the numbers that he's playing. You talk about how those two are buying into the program. I think on top of that, yeah, before they even bought into the program per se, it was a solidification of them playing at the best level at the same time. We never really got to see what that looked like since James Harden's been in Philadelphia. James Harden had a lot of instances when Joel Embiid wasn't hitting or scoring at the best rate. James Harden was averaging 30 plus. But when when James Harden wasn't doing his best due to injury or he was just having off games, that's when we saw Joel Embiid elevate his game. I think this is the very first time since the two players got together since last season, you actually saw James Harden and Joel Embiid consistently play at the highest levels of basketball that they can. And having that combined with the improvement on Montrezl Harrell coming off the bench, Tyrese Maxey having a career year. Those are the things that's going to help take the 76ers to that next level. And like you just mentioned, they bought into the program, but they're not just buying into the program, they're executing and excelling within the program at a rate that, quite frankly, Philadelphia hasn't had since those two got together. I think, to me, that's the biggest difference when you talk about the pairing of the two. Not just the pairing of the two and the talent we know that they have, but rising to the occasion both at the same time together each and every night as of recent, playing at the high level to give Philadelphia the chance to excel as a team, to get them to where they are now. I think that's the key that gives Philadelphia a chance.
Oh, absolutely. And then, you add the play of other guys on the bench. We talked about Montrezl Harrell, but Shake Milton has come through, even in spite of not really shooting the best from beyond the arc to start the year. I have the numbers in front of me right now. He's shooting 44% from three-point land off of the bench in the month of January. Georgia Niang is also shooting 44% from downtown in the month of January. And if their bench, especially in the minutes in which Embiid sits, can give them any positive contribution at either end of the floor, Doc Rivers will take it. Mm-hmm. Now, I must say, is somebody who has covered Harden dating back to his time in Houston. He's not the explosive player that he once was. He's taking more mid-range shots than he ever has before, and he's also posting up a lot more. Things that I think are a plus. However, there are some times where he tried to get to that rim, and you could tell he's just not able to get there at the level that he once used to be. And I think those years in Houston when he was leading the league in scoring has taken some of the tread off the tires, if you will. But if he can learn how to counterbalance his act like he has been doing lately and do that consistently down the stretch, Philly can be nice. And one thing you got to keep in mind, in the playoffs, the game is predicated in the half court.
Mm-hmm.
If Embiid can stay out of foul trouble and just stay healthy, then maybe they have a shot. I still think they need a couple of pieces on the bench, and I have to see it to believe it. Because one thing about Philadelphia is that they always have these stretches in the regular season where they look dominant.
Mm-hmm.
People forget just a couple years ago they were the number one seed, and people were ready to pencil them in as the favorite in the East.
Mm-hmm.
However, it proved to be to no avail. Joel and James had some nice synergy going in the honeymoon phases last year, but it faltered. Now, I don't think they running it at this season, but those other guys got to continue to step up and be solid. I think Tobias Harris has stepped up as well as of late, but I'm interested to see how far that they could take it. But I want to ask you this real quick, Josh. Last week, we took the time to discuss the impact of Kevin Durant's injury and how it impacts the Nets as they try and stay among the top half of the Eastern Conference. Brooklyn's lost their first two games without KD thus far. One to the Celtics, the other one to a team that we'll talk about in a minute. But do you believe that the Sixers are the team that benefits the most from the month-long stretch in which KD will be out of action?
I believe so. Especially since they're not too far out from that 4-2 spot. They could switch that real quick. So I'm not gonna. So I think they have the best benefit from it. However, I will say this. It's different when you play a month without Kevin Durant, but when you got a healthy Kevin Durant going to the playoffs, that's a whole other beast.
Oh, for sure.
And I think when I was reading the rundown, you wanted, one of the things you asked was, what led to determine how far they can go. Well, when you look at the standings, I think it just depends on where they end up finishing the season at. Because let's just say let's just say the playoffs start today. They're the 4th seed. They play against the 5th seed. Who's the 5th seed? The Cleveland Cavaliers.
Cleveland. Yeah, I was about to say Cleveland. Yeah, at the top of my head, I had to look for a minute.
Right.
That would be a hell of a series.
That would be a hell of a series. But it can be a problem for Joel Embiid too.
Oh, yeah.
Because he actually got defenders that are young and lengthy that can actually handle and have the versatility to guard his offensive game. Combine that with the young guards and guard-to-guard matchup in James Harden against Donovan Mitchell, which is already going to be a powerful guard dynamic on offense and defensively. I think Donovan Mitchell can hold his own. But what about Tyrese Maxey? Oh, I forgot. You got a guy named Darius Garland, an all-star, who could technically guard him too. I think Philadelphia loses that series. I really do. And if they and that's them not making it past the first round. And that doesn't even include going against teams like Milwaukee Bucks, who've always been stable. They're winning games without Giannis right now and Chris Middleton. So I think it just depends on where they end up in the seeding. If they play anyone lower than the 5th seed right now, oh yeah, most definitely. You can pretty much do a write-in for that. If they have to play against any of those top teams, if they slip and they got to play any of those top teams, bro, I don't know. they may not go very far. And that's not good. And that's not a good look for Philadelphia, considering they gave up a lot to get James Harden. And this is also another knock against Doc Rivers, because he is known for not going further than what he should be when it comes to playoff and winning expectations. He's only done it once, and he hasn't done it again since he won that championship in Boston. So I don't know. I think this is the year where if Philadelphia doesn't go far, which quite honestly, especially with the way this is looking right now, I don't expect them to. So if they don't go farther than what they should or they need to be, this is the year where you check, okay, is James Harden staying here long term or not? Do we move off of Doc Rivers as the head coach? Because at the end of the day, he's had multiple tries now to turn this thing around. He hasn't turned it around in the way that they wanted it. What is Daryl Morey going to do? Do you start hearing the Mike D'Antoni rumors if James Harden stays? Do you hear any other coaching possibilities that can take up for Doc Rivers, considering, their success has become limited than what it should be? It's a lot of question marks that's going to come up in the air. So I think this is the make and break year for Philadelphia. And then if they don't do all this year, I don't know. You covered James Harden in Houston. There's reports going out that James Harden want to go back to Houston.
Yes, there was during the Christmas holidays. You're correct.
Right. If that is true, you telling me James Harden's going to turn down the opportunity to play with Joel Embiid, one of the best players in this game, to play with the Young Bucks? Oh, that's that type of stuff that's like, whoa, to me. When you think about that's even an option at this point for James Harden, considering where he's been through, not just in Houston, but going from there to Brooklyn, playing with other stars than Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, and then going from to Philadelphia, where he has at least one superstar to play with in Joel Embiid. It's just going to be a very interesting offseason if the Philadelphia Sixers don't accomplish their real expectations, which should be a championship. This is a roster that's built for a championship.
You bring up a lot of good points, but then one point too that you got to consider is if they were to get knocked out within the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, not only what that means for Doc Rivers, Daryl Morey, and James Harden, what's the future of Joel Embiid in Philadelphia? Does he even want to be in Philadelphia if that happens? That's why I kind of wonder, and that's the question that I would have to ask myself, because everybody talks about the Harden and Houston rumors, but what about Joel? That's a guy, if you was to say he's on a trading block, or Joel was to go to the Sixers front office and say, hey, I want out of here, everybody in the league gonna be picking up their phones for him. So it's a situation that remains to be seen. I wasn't really doing too much forecasting into the future, but now that we're talking about it, and you saying that Philadelphia is the 4th seed, which they are, and if the season ended today, they would play Cleveland. Yeah, that would make for one hell of a first-round series, and that's a first-round series that I think could go either way, and on paper, you would have to be mentally prepared for it being a 7-game series if it were to go down. With all that said, though, I do believe if Philadelphia can get a top 2 or 3 seed some way, somehow, that maybe, they could get into that second round. But what you're highlighting is very important, Josh, and I get what you're trying to establish, and that's the importance of matchups in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And how key they are in determining either how far a team goes or how quickly a team can end up going home sooner than many people expect. But I want to depart away from Philadelphia to talk about a young team that finished with a 24-58 record a season ago, but now they stand only just 3 wins shy of their win total last year and only a game and a half behind the Los Angeles Clippers, for the sixth spot in the Western Conference playoff picture, and that is the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have put together a 15-6 record since mid-December and won 6 out of their first 8 games to open up the new year, as they have managed to garner some big-time wins in their last 3 consecutive games, sitting only half a game behind the 10th and final play-in spot in the West, despite being without rookie forward Ousmane Dieng, Alexei Pokusevsky, and Jeremiah Robinson Earl due to various injuries, in addition to even rookie guard Jalen Williams off and on during the early days of the year, as Thunder fans now find themselves reimagining a season that many projected to be bleak at the onset of the year. To me, Josh, I'm just going to keep game honest with you. The Thunder are a team that I think a lot of teams in the league, they take for granted on a night-to-night basis. They think, well, because this is a young squad, guys not going to come in ready, this is going to be an easy win. And they get slapped in the mouth. Mm-hmm. Why? Because Mark Daigneault, he got these guys playing hard. And he's a guy who, while I don't know or believe will be the coach of the year, he should get some coach of the year votes, because he's using everybody in his rotation right now and making things happen. Tremont Waters hitting big time catch and shoot triples. The other Jalen Williams, might well call him thing 1 and thing 2, the taller version, the one from Arkansas. He just had a game where he put up 11-6 against the Sixers off the bench. He's coming into his own. Josh Giddey, can't nobody really stop him from getting inside the paint right now. And, it seemed like he had an eye pass down the lane against Brooklyn the other night while I was watching on League Pass. He was getting wherever he wanted. And if the double came, it was too late. He was able to kick it out to the shooter, knock down the 3. Lou Dort holding his own. We know about him well enough, dating back to the days in which Chris Paul was there and managed to take a team that a lot of people thought was lottery bound into the playoffs. And we ain't even mentioned Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is currently 5th in the league in scoring with nearly 31 a night. And oh, by the way, he racking up nearly 6 assists a game.
Man, Oklahoma City Thunder, when it comes to this season, you mentioned the Chris Paul year, where he came into town and just wanted to be a mentor to these young guys, at least for a season, get them in the right direction. And the next thing you know, maybe after the next year, they can at least start trying to look at a rebuild. The fact that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was part of that team and is now leading that team to the even though they are currently at the 11th spot in the West, they're competitive as heck every night. That's something that is a testimony to not just Chris Paul and his leadership, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's willingness and effort to learn from the best and apply that wisdom to be the leader in the face of the franchise, where now Oklahoma City has a chance any given night, whether you like it or not. And sometimes, yeah, you're not just going to get smacked. You're going to get a beat down, because the way they will do it is kill you defensively and don't let it get in the transition game. That young team is running and gunning. And if you watched last week against the Miami Heat,
yeah,
I guarantee, try to throw a 2-3 zone at them. Shai said it doesn't even matter. I'm still gonna give you 30. How do you want it? Right? So what I see is a growing and advanced stages of what this Oklahoma City Thunder team is supposed to look like. And need to remind you, they're playing this well without their number 2 draft pick, Chet Holmgren.
I didn't even bring that up. I was waiting for you to bring that up.
Yeah, Chet Holmgren's not even playing right now. He's out for the whole season.
Yep.
Imagine when he gets healthy and comes back, and you talk about a play-in tournament, and you talk about them being contenders for potentially in the play-in. They definitely are. When you look at the Western Conference, there's 2 teams ahead of them, the Trailblazers and the Timberwolves. I would never bet against Damian Lillard. So we all know Damian Lillard's he's gonna keep that Trailblazers team somewhat playoff afloat. But Minnesota's struggling, bro. If they ain't making any moves, I don't see them going far, considering they haven't figured out how to make that dynamic work with Rudy Gobert in Minnesota, especially on the offensive end. So if the Jazz continue to struggle, if the Jazz struggle, Golden State right now is, I expect them to be in the playoffs, but they're currently sitting at 7. They're not a good road team. What if they continue to slip? That gives Oklahoma City a good chance to climb up in the standings and be part of that play-in. So yeah, they're legit contenders in that way. I think it's possible. And if I'm one of the top teams in the Western Conference, that's one of the worst teams to play against, because that's one game. One bad game against Oklahoma City, with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander being the top 5 scorer in the league, 30 plus. I don't know if you want to put that chance. And this is a young team that can really shock the world when it comes to playing against the best in the Western Conference. So yeah, it's definitely possible. But the fact that they're playing this well right now without Chet Holmgren, and knowing all the picks Sam Presti got, they're probably gonna have another good pick next year. I don't know, man. It's scary. But I want to ask you this real quick question.
Yeah.
Chet Holmgren has been out all season long. We obviously heard reports over time about his progression, how he's making progress. Do you think if the Thunder actually make the playoffs, we have a good chance of seeing a Chet Holmgren appearance?
Nah, I doubt it. The only reason I doubt that is because that's a hell of a situation to throw a rookie in to when he hasn't played a minute of regular season action. I think that this will be Chet Holmgren's red shirt year, no matter what happens or how the season unfolds for the Oklahoma City Thunder. With all of that said, though, I think when you bring that up into this conversation, that makes what they're doing all the more impressive, man. And not to even mention Josh Giddey, who has been huge over the last 10 games for this ball club. He's shooting around, I want to say, close to 35% or better from the three-point line in his last 10 games. And he's getting to the rim at will. And what I like about this squad, like I said, they competitive. And in a Western Conference where you only have like a handful of squads that are over 500, that 6 through 10 is going to fluctuate like crazy. Mind you, Phoenix right now isn't really doing that well.
Right.
Phoenix right now, as I pull up the standings, as I bring this up and I'm on the microphone talking, Phoenix currently sits 12th, a half a game below the Thunder. And they you got several teams fighting for 4 spots in the play-in, which is seed 7 through 10. Yeah, I don't see why the Thunder don't have a chance. I really don't. I don't see why they don't have a chance when you put it all in a context like that. And oh, by the way, these dudes defend. Yep. And they ain't just been beating crappy ass teams. They beat Boston at home. They beat the Sixers on the road. And they're not really that great of a road team if you look at their record. And they also came into Chicago, knocked off the Bulls, and then followed that up with going into Brooklyn and knocking off a Nets team, even though they didn't have Kevin Durant, and did so, I believe, by double digits. So when I look at the way that Dagnall got this group playing, he deserves some credit and some praise. And Let him tell you based on some quotes I was reading on social media, they're not ready just yet. But that's the fun part about this group. Do they really have to be? All they got to do is just come out and compete and let the chips fall where they lay. And they really playing with house money. And if you're the Clippers right now and you Lawrence Frank and that front office regime, you kind of got to be asking yourself, hey, did we make the right decision? Trading our future away with Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and all of these draft picks to go and get Paul George? Because right now, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander has more total points on the season than Paul George and Kawhi Leonard combined. Would you have ever thought that entering the halfway point of the regular season where we are right now as of this recording? I sure as hell wouldn't have.
No, not at all. That's kind of scary.
Yeah.
That's scary if you really think about it. Yeah, but it just shows the growth of and it just shows the growth of Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. And even though he took a leap, we have to remind you that last season was a leap too. This was just he's progressed ever since he left the Clippers to go to the Thunder. That first year with Chris Paul, he played better, but then he got even better the next year. Wasn't outstanding like this, where it's so public, so public to see. But he got better in little ways. But this year was that jump. He took that responsibility of signing that max deal now. So now that you're the max player and they trust him the keys to the franchise, this is him saying, okay, look here, I've arrived now. I'm glad you're trusting me the keys to the door because I'm coming right in. Oklahoma City hasn't had this type of level of play since Russell Westbrook. Like, that's something that for Oklahoma City, knowing that when they got rid of Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Russell Westbrook, you never thought they would get to this level again. But they are. And they have one person that's leading the front, and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, which is making that future over there looking pretty bright. That's something special to acknowledge.
Oh, indeed. And the funny part about it is you had some people trying to forecast Oklahoma City trading SGA away prior to the start of this season or at the deadline. And I'm like, for what? Even back then, for what? What you doing that for? That's one of your building blocks right there, no matter how your season plays out. I think that's off limits right now. I think that conversation is null and void and over with at this time. But I want to move the show along from the upstart squad and OKC to discuss a team that is on the heels of the Celtics for the best record in all of basketball right now. And they lie in the heart of the Rocky Mountains, known the most as the Denver Nuggets, who currently have a 30-13 record through the halfway point of the season. They're riding a 6-game win streak into their tilt against the Portland Trail Blazers as of this recording. Nuggets boast the third best offensive rating in the month of January, scoring nearly 122 points per 100 possessions, to no surprise, led behind the reigning back-to-back MVP Nikola Jokic, who for the first time in the last couple of years has his running mates and guards Jamal Murray and forward Michael Porter Jr. at his side healthy, dating back to their days in the bubble, as they stand atop of the Western Conference beside Memphis as we speak. We're currently in week 14 of the NBA season, Josh. Has Denver done enough to cement themselves as the team to beat in the conference to you?
I would say yes, just simply because of what you just mentioned prior to the transition. You got your running mates with him now. Jokic is not the standalone guy there. You got Michael Porter Jr., who has continuously evolved ever since he arrived in Denver and played especially when he played healthy. And Jamal Murray. They missed Jamal Murray last season, which is why they didn't go as far as they could have. but they also got better reinforcements too coming off that bench. You got Bruce Brown playing at a high level, Tavius Caldwell-Pope shooting the ball, playing on both ends of the floor to counteract with the improved play of Aaron Gordon. They finally know how to play Aaron Gordon when it comes to playing with Jokic. So I think with all those factors coming into play and the fact that they've been deep in the playoffs runs before and gotten their hearts broken, I think they're prepared to make another run to where maybe they have a really good chance to get over the hump. I think that experience combined with the fact that you have your full reinforcements that go around. That's the biggest key. But at the end of the day, just because you're cemented in this role doesn't mean you're gonna actually fulfill it. The team only goes as far as Jamal Murray can take them. Jamal Murray's the X factor in this whole thing. Jokic has proven night in and night out he is one of the best. He is arguably he's a chance of being the best player in this league, knowing that he's the two-time back-to-back MVP and on the verge of being in the race again for a potential third MVP. So we know what Jokic is going to do. But the team only goes as far as the second best player, and that's Jamal Murray. We know what he can do, but now that he's healthy, we got to see what the future looks like down the road when it comes playoff time. But currently, right now, constructed, oh yeah, Denver's one of the scary teams that you don't want to play against in any round of the playoffs.
I want to believe in this team. This was a team that I always expected to be a perennial playoff team once Jokic began to come into his own. It's kind of funny because several years ago, I was doing a show with one of my homies, Brendan Welper at Radio DePaul. We was talking about Jokic, and I was asking him, is he the most underrated player in the league or the player in the league that the majority of America is sleep on right now? We well past that. Mm-hmm. Everybody know who he is. But with that said, you bring up Jamal Murray being the X factor of this Nugget squad. I trust Jamal Murray. Or at least the Jamal Murray that I saw last time he had a chance to play in the playoffs and was actually healthy. And that was in that bubble. That Jamal Murray, if I see that again, yeah, I trust that guy. And I at least know that he's capable of it. To me, the biggest X factor is going to be Michael Porter Jr. If he's healthy, it can provide them with quality minutes, not only as an elite catch and shooter, but making the most out of his touches. It's going to be scary for opponents. And also, if he can prove to be serviceable on the defensive end of the floor, which I have to give him his credit as of lately. He's been playing great defense lately, and in turn is leading to wins. And he's made strides on that end of the floor. Like, one of the things that impressed me the most with this group in Denver is that they didn't have Jokic in LA when they were taking on the Clippers due to a hand injury. But Murray stepped up, put in like 24, I believe, that night, and they won by 12. Michael Porter Jr. also stepped up, and he wasn't just looking to take threes. He was actually driving inside to the lane and getting 2 points consistently. And one thing he said in an article that I had the pleasure of reading in the Denver Post, he was talking about how he feels very healthy. And he's trying his best to linger and play through the pain as much as he can. And even though he's having to jump off of his right foot more than he's accustomed to, he's finding a way to make it work. I just hope that guy can stay healthy. Because if he can, to me, he's the biggest difference in regards to whether or not Denver can do the unexpected or they end up where they always have been. And that's on the outside looking in at the rest of the league competing for the Larry O'Brien Trophy. I think they cemented themselves as a legitimate contender. Mm-hmm. Is the team to beat? I want to say yes, but right now I'm still in that show me phase. They got to show me. They got to show me. It's some teams in the West that, if fully healthy, I would buy more stock in than Denver. Memphis is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
New Orleans, although they are a mystery in the sense that we have not seen a healthy Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, and CJ McCollum on the floor for a long, extended period of time. That's the team I would buy stock in, especially if they make a move at the deadline to acquire not only a point guard, but a center who can protect the rim. And I believe they're definitely going to be aggressive over there. Trajan Langdon and Griffin and Swin Cash and them, I think they're going to be aggressive. But I don't know if they've done enough for me to cement themselves as the team to beat in the West just yet. But it's open.
I understand, man. I understand. And the reason why I said Jamal Murray is going to be the X factor to see as far as they can go, because it's not that I don't trust Jamal Murray. I trust Jamal Murray. I don't trust Michael Porter Jr. because as well as Michael Porter Jr. can score and shoot the ball effectively, he can also drain you and put you out of games too. Because his volume is so high and he looks so aggressively to look for shots, which is not always a bad thing. But he likes to play sometimes out of the offensive flow. So when he's not shooting the ball well, he actually shoots the teams out of games. And that's not what Denver needs, considering what Jokic and Jamal Murray already bring to the table. So if Michael Porter Jr. doesn't stay in his lane, I can't trust that, I got to trust that Jamal Murray is going to ring him in along with Jokic to put the team back in the position that they need to be to keep moving forward, which has always been Denver's struggles in previous seasons. So I totally understand where you at with as far as cementing themselves as a team to beat. I just think this year I saw growth in the fact that not just in their core players, and especially having a healthy Jamal Murray, but the fact that they got a better bench. I think those additions of Bruce Bowen and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope are difference makers coming off the bench, considering the previous years that Denver had. And that was a struggle of theirs in those previous years, not having the strongest bench. They've always had solid bench players, but not the strongest that helped them get them over the hump. I think they have that this year. But Denver's also known for being so great in the regular season that when it comes to the playoff time, they eventually collapse.
Exactly.
So I can't let's put it this way. Right now they have my stock, but just like any stock market, if I pull out in the right amount of time and invest in somebody else, I still get my money's worth.
That's true.
Denver right now has my money, but basically come playoff time, if they don't see anything better, if I don't see any signs that things can be different, that stock's gonna get pulled out, and I'm putting myself in another investment. Because, just like you said, Denver got to show me what's good. I'm looking at the right now. Right now, yeah, they are. But when you talk about the future, we in the same boat. I'm just going to make sure I put my stock early so I can get my money's worth back. And I can put it in another team to invest in, take my money that much further.
And then another guy we haven't talked about or really shown some love to, and a guy that could be considered among players in the running for the Sixth Man of the Year award, is the man out of VCU, the guard, Bones Highland.
Bones Highland, yeah.
He's been big off the bench. He's averaging 13, 3 assists, shooting 40% from beyond the arc. If he could give them any extra boost on the offensive end of the floor on nights where a Jamal Murray ain't got it, or Michael Porter Jr. is laboring a little bit, going through a rough funk. Yeah, like that could be a big addition for them as well. And I know he's helped them greatly off of the bench as of late in some games, especially in their most recent win against the Orlando Magic, in which we saw Nikola Jokic hit a game-winning 3 to seal the deal in a contest that came down to the wire. But I want to move away from Denver to talk about the Western Conference from a broad context. The Nuggets, Grizzlies, Pelicans, and Kings, they currently sit among the top 4 of the West, to many surprise at this point of the year. What do you make of that? Has the West officially become the weaker conference in the NBA? And the only reason why I asked you this question, I've been seeing a lot of people across NBA Twitter complain about how the West is weak. And I find that interesting because is it as strong as it used to be? I don't think it is. But I find it funny how we always say that the West is weak whenever we don't see teams that we were accustomed to seeing throughout our time following the game, not among the creme de la creme in the West anymore. Because since 2000, there have only been 5 teams to make it out of the West and represent the conference in the NBA Finals. And that's the Lakers, the Spurs, the Mavericks, the Thunder, the Warriors, and the Suns. So I stand correct. That's 6 teams, only 6. Like, just because you haven't seen those 6 at the top of the conference, I don't know if that means that the conference is like truly weaker. But what do you make of that?
It's not weaker. I think it's just more diversified. Because you talk about the teams, those 6 teams you just mentioned. Out of those 6 teams I just mentioned, how many of those teams actually made it to the finals more than once?
Good point.
Less than
4
half.
of them.
4 of them, right?
4 of them.
Yeah. So when you think about that compared to what the roster looks like right now, where if you look at the top 4, none of them have ever been to the finals. I mean, if you got to be a basketball fan to enjoy this, because this, all you're seeing is a new era in basketball. Times are changing. Teams that have been down for the longest are finally coming up on the up and round. The teams that have been so successful for so long are now going on the downhill. And the reality is, even some of those teams that are new, they're just in a funk right now. They're in an inconsistent wave. Because when you talk about a talent perspective, let's be very serious. Phoenix Suns is one of the most talented teams in the Western Conference. No one expecting them being dropped to the 12th seed right now. Golden State. Only reason why they're number 7th in the West right now is because they suck on the road. If they actually was playing better on the road, they'll be a top 4 team in the Western Conference. So it's like, it's a new era in basketball. That's all I can really say about it. It's just a new era in basketball to where the Western Conference isn't necessarily weaker. Is it weak compared to the early thousands where it was at its highest peak? Oh, yeah. It's not as strong as that point, but it's still pretty darn strong. The only difference is it's diversified. So now the teams that weren't winning as much during that era, now they're winning. And it's a great thing as a basketball fan to see. It's new blood, new excitement. It's great for the league. When you talk about spreading the wealth of the bread, like, everybody thought the league was crashing down until you saw the We Believe team of the Warriors, right? They overcome the Warriors, and now all of a sudden, it's the league's best favorite team to watch. They were the AC in the Western Conference. No one expected the Warriors to be good, but yet they went to the playoffs and knocked out the number 1 seed. That's what we live for. We want those storylines. We want that experience and that exposure. We can have that this year. The Pelicans, I'm not surprised by Memphis per se because of their success over the past couple of years. But the Pelicans and the Kings, you're talking about 2 teams that barely made the playoffs since the early thousands. They're in the top 3, 4 teams of the Western Conference. That's exciting. That's historical. Especially when you're talking about the players that represent these franchises. Zion Williamson, box office. De'Aaron Fox, box office. These are players that you are willing to pay money to go check out in the NBA. Ja Morant in Memphis, box office. You would go to pay and see to watch them play. Even when Dallas, Luka, everybody paying money to see this brother. So it's like, it's a new era of basketball that a lot of people from maybe the older heads and older times of basketball don't want to embrace. And that's okay. But our generation, this new age era of basketball, we're embracing the heck out of it, because this is the first time we see teams that never got the quite success that they could have had over these past years and time. They're actually getting it now. And they're making a huge difference in how we look at the game of basketball and how we look at the league in general. And that's something exciting that you have to be excited for as a basketball fan, not just an NBA fan, but a basketball fan. That's the difference.
You hit the nail on the head, man. Spot on. I agree with you. And the fact that these 4 franchises that currently sit in the top 4 of the Western Conference playoff picture are all small markets in a way, I kind of feel like this was David Stern's dream.
Oh, yeah.
This is why David Stern was hell-bent and excited when the Cleveland Cavaliers got the number 1 overall pick in the 2003 NBA draft to select a forward out of St. Vincent St. Mary High School, who we now know is LeBron James. This is what he was fighting for. So in a way, he's kind of looking up in heaven like, hey, I got what I wanted. And with the way in which these contracts are structured, where guys after their first 4 years in the league are deemed to be restricted free agents and can have their highest bids from opposing teams matched by the teams in which they were drafted by, that guarantees these markets at best at least 7 or 8 years of top tier talent, or guys that they consider to be cornerstones of their franchise. And the guys in which you name, Josh, are franchise cornerstones, such as Nikola Jokic, who was drafted by the Denver Nuggets as a 2nd round pick. Ja Morant, who was selected with the 2nd overall pick. Zion Williamson, who was selected with the number 1 overall pick in the same draft class as Ja Morant back in 2019. And De'Aaron Fox, who was a top 10 lottery pick in his draft class. So when you think about it like that, I mean, you really can't be too shocked by it. And what these organizations have done, and kudos to them, is they built up a franchise that's attractive enough to maybe not necessarily entice the top 10 stars, but the borderline stars enough to say, well, you know what? I want to come here. And I'm attracted to what you have here because I know we had a potential to win. And when you have a top 10 player in these respective markets, you never know what can happen. I think it's really much fuss about nothing. Do I think the East is stronger than the West right now? Yeah. And that's okay. But to sit up and say that it's become the weaker conference solely because of the fact that you don't know as a fan who makes up these teams, I mean, that's on you. Because like you said, Josh, these teams are coming to compete. And when I look at Sacramento and know the history of Sacramento, being a young child, first coming up as a fan of the game, watching games on the NBA on NBC, and seeing the crowds at the old Arco Arena with the cowbells and whatnot. Those fans love the game just as much as the fans in New York do, and just as much as the fans in Boston do, in LA, in Chicago. And now they finally got a competitive team to root for, which is kind of cool, considering the fact that, for those who don't know, Sacramento almost lost their team due to not having an arena deal in place or an arena that was satisfactory to NBA conditions. And if not for Kevin Johnson, who was the mayor at the time, fighting for them to build that new arena in which they playing in the Golden One Center, we might not even have a team there no more. And I know that some people will say, well, that's no big deal. But to those fans of Sacramento, it would have been, because they've been supporting that team for years, since day one, from the time they moved from Kansas City over there.
And it's funny how you mentioned, the small markets thriving in the Western Conference. Eastern Conference got some small markets that thrived over time too.
Yeah.
Look, a prime example is Brooklyn. No one wanted to come to New Jersey, but Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving changed the narrative. I'm not going to go to the Knicks where that is the whole team of New York. Nah, I'm going to go to Brooklyn. They chose the smaller market team of the city. Look at Milwaukee and what they're doing over there in Milwaukee. You draft Giannis. Giannis brings you a championship. He could have left to go to another team, but he chose to stay long term, and he got you a championship ring. Philadelphia may not, be championship ready yet, but you have players that stayed, like Joel Embiid, who helped bring good guys over there, like the James Hardens of the world. You talk about Cleveland. Cleveland was trash before LeBron got there. LeBron gets there. They finally bring him a ring after multiple final runs. But even when they leave, they rebuild. And now you got Donovan Mitchell there that actually was cool with being traded there. You got Darius Garland that wants to stay there long term. You got the Jared Allens that want to stay there long term. And now they're competing in the Eastern Conference. This goes throughout the whole entire NBA. They were starting to jumping in his casket wishing he was allowed to see this. That's how
he really is.
That's how serious it is. Because, like you said, this is what he wanted. But Adam Silver knows that, and now he's exploiting it because now it's more of a national game. Now they're trying to expand what they're doing in the league and putting it in other parts of the country, of different parts of different countries. So you have to be an avid basketball and NBA fan to understand the dynamic change that's taking place within the NBA right now. And if you don't fully understand that, you will be bitter about the fact that your favorite team in Los Angeles is sitting at the bottom of the Western Conference, even with a star in LeBron James, who, even though he's 38 years old, and at times, I'm not going to lie, Father Time makes it seem like he's still 40 with the way he runs. But at the end of the day, he's still giving you almost 30 a game, right? Like, the bigger markets are still suffering. Look at the Bulls. We thought for the longest we've arrived. We got Boots back. We got 3 all-stars on our team. We rolling. And look at us, suffering at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, barely trying to get a taste of the crumbs at the Masters table. Like, that's just pretty much what we're looking at in the Eastern Conference. And it's amazing to see how these small markets are thriving with less resources compared to the big teams who are struggling. That's very interesting to see. And the fact that that dynamic is changing now, yeah, y'all better get real used to this. Make sure your seat is real comfortable because the new era has arrived.
But you know why you're saying it? You're saying it because, see, when you're in a small market, you have a smaller margin for error. You have to hit on the draft picks. And I don't consider the Brooklyn Nets as the small market franchise, so to speak, although I get what you're saying, because Brooklyn is to the New York market what the Clippers are to the LA market. They the second team in the second city. Right. But Milwaukee is an incredible example. And I'd even add Indiana, who has been very successful over the last 25 to 30 years, in spite of the fact that they never won an NBA championship, dating back to the days of Reggie Miller and Larry Bird being the head coach there, and Isaiah Thomas and Rick Carlisle following in his footsteps, who is now back with the franchise for his second tenure with a young point guard and Tyrese Halliburton. But you have a smaller margin of error. And I want to say this real quick. You have so many fans for the longest who have been bitching about the lack of parity in the NBA.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the same teams every year. I can remember hearing that argument when Cleveland and Golden State met in the finals 4 years in a row. Now you kind of have some parity and you don't know what to do. And I've always been someone who, I don't try to hold any sympathy for small market teams. If you mess up through the draft, then find your way out of it. Spend the money if you have to. Same with the bigger market teams. Even the big market teams who are sometimes reluctant to spend money. And I won't say no names. I'm just going to speak facts to that. That's true. That happens. But as a fan, don't complain about the lack of parity. When for years, this is all that you was asking for, and you was complaining about the lack of it. And I'm almost 30 years old. And if it's one thing I can say about the NBA that a lot of NBA fans don't think about, nor really ponder upon enough for me, is that I can honestly say that I've seen every team, maybe outside of the New Orleans Pelicans and the Charlotte Hornets, have a legitimate chance at winning an NBA championship. I can honestly say that at least once, even if they never done it. Hell, Denver got to a conference finals.
They did.
With Carmelo Anthony. They've gotten to the conference finals with Nikola Jokic. They've been to 2 conference finals within the last 14 years. That's more than the Bulls in the last 25 years. And why is that? Because of how they drafted, the personnel in the front office, the scouting departments. Their margin for error is smaller. Some of these franchises aren't attracting a top 5 or 10 player in free agency. The only way they get those players is if they draft them. But I want to, that's just something to, for food for thought, because I don't think a lot of people really ponder on that, bro. But I want to move along real quick, just from speaking on the top half of the Western Conference to 2 teams who were expected to be there. However, they find themselves fighting to reach higher ground after entering training camp with lofty expectations, and that's the Golden State Warriors and the Los Angeles Clippers. Clippers of this recording, they've won 3 out of their last 10 games, continuing to deal with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George being in and out of the lineup through various parts of the season, not to even mention key role players such as Norman Powell and John Wall as of late, who have had to miss time due to injury. Currently sit a half a game up on the Warriors going into a bout against the 76ers. As we're talking on this, I believe LA is currently 6th in the Western Conference playoff picture, Meanwhile, the Dubs sit at 500 with a 22-22 record, which one could say is sort of a miracle considering their 5-17 record on the road away from the Chase Center, which is among the worst one in the league right now. Stephen Curry just recently returned this past week from a shoulder injury. I most think that the defending champs may need to make a move in an effort to go back-to-back once again. To me, I'm concerned about both of these California franchises. But if I had to choose which one I'm concerned about the most between the Clippers and the Warriors, it's simple for me. I'm going to say the LA Clippers. And here's why. When you have guys like Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, even though when healthy, you could argue are easily among the top 10 or 15 players in the league, depending on where you want to rank them. When they're not playing consistently together, and we're at the midway point of the season, that's troublesome, especially when your team is free falling in the standings. They can't afford to not have these guys together as the year goes forward. And once you get past the All-Star break, this can't. And I think this team, in spite of the talent that they have on paper, they got to start treating some of these regular season games way more seriously than what they have been. And they can't just think that it's going to be a gravy train to the title. So I'm more concerned about the Clippers just because of the fact that I see stretches from them where even in spite of their greatness, like that offense gets stagnant. It's not playing with a pace or a tempo, especially when John Wall is out. And then when you're missing role players that are key to your success, like a Norman Powell, who's had a hell of a year off the bench when he has played, you gotta figure that out quick. But what's your thoughts on that, Josh? Like, what California franchise are you concerned about the most right now between the Clippers and the Warriors?
Clippers. You haven't won anything. Why would I be worried about a franchise that won stuff? Warriors won four titles in 8 years, 8 years. That's nothing. This is all they're doing is just, if anything, they're worrying about who's coming back next year. They ain't worried about this season. They have solidified themselves as what a dynasty looks like with the championship that they won last season. I think that's all they was worried about. Okay, we a dynasty now. It's official. We won our 4th ring. All right, be cool. And this is just another, first half of the year where they're just trying to figure stuff out. That's fine. Jet lag. They'll figure it out. They'll get better. They might even play in the play-in tournament, but guess what? You get hot at the right time, you don't want to play against the Warriors. We already get that. The Clippers, however, this was supposed to be your year. You're supposed to have a healthy Kawhi. You're supposed to have a healthy Paul George. You brought in Norman Powell to go with Robert Covington. And you brought in John Wall, who last year was supposed to be your missing piece. You were struggling with point guard play. You got a healthy John Wall who can still contribute at a decent level. This and not to mention, you have arguably one of the greatest coaches in the league in Ty Lue. You shouldn't be taking that extra leap already. But now you're barely to survive above water. There's no excuse. You have all the talent in the world, from starters to your role players. You have arguably the best talented roster in the whole entire league. And yet y'all can't win games together? Y'all can't find a way to pull those strings and step up in ways where your role players were starters on other teams. They should know how to have that next man up mentality and ball out when you know for a fact, quite frankly, you can't trust Paul George or Kawhi Leonard to be healthy for a full 82-game season. That's the expectation you should have knew when you signed up playing for the Clippers. But to see them play at this rate, where their defense is bad, defense is atrocious, but offensively, there's no rhythm, there's no understanding, and it's like guys don't know what the roles should be when Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are not on the floor.
Yeah.
They're so used to playing those role player roles that they don't know whether to go back to the starter roles that they had in their previous teams or to stay in their certain lane that they have lined up with the Clippers. You got to figure that out because right now you can't guarantee Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are going to be healthy and fully running and ready to go as a well-oiled machine come playoff time. You can't expect that. So you got to figure out who actually needs to come out of that role player role and be the starter role that we know that they can play. Then that's something that Ty Lue has to figure out. And if anything, I trust that Ty Lue will figure that out. He's one of the best coaches to figure those things out. But yeah, it's very disappointing considering you literally had arguably before the season started, on paper, the best roster in the league with arguably the top 3 coach in the league and the most enthusiastic money spending owner you ever could have in the league. And yet you're struggling to just survive and breathe above water. Yeah, that's a problem considering that the other California team already has 4 rings and can afford a season to lose.
And mind you, the team that playing your building, they got what, 17 banners up there at the crypto. And And that's something that you have to look at, even though they do now like put a drape over the banners, and they're trying to establish their own culture, which I love. I respect it. They want to pay a homage to the blue collar citizens of LA. I like that. But if you're going to pay homage to the blue collar citizens of LA, you got to come ready to work. And the motto that I've seen watching games on League Pass when I watch Clippers games is give no quarter. I think they need to put that in the locker room somewhere for them guys. It just be like, hey, man, look, we at one point in time, the Clippers were in the top 4 or 3 in the Western Conference playoff picture, and they were looking really good. Now, with all these injuries and Paul George status being in limbo with his hamstring, even though I do believe, according to reports, and our man Law Murray from The Athletic, who covers the Clippers, beat writer, who we follow very closely, he's been a part of some shows here on War Media's platform in the past. He was saying that Paul George at some point will be cleared to return soon. I know
he's playing tonight.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. As of this recording, he'll be playing this evening against the Philadelphia 76ers. I know it was a game time decision. Hopefully, you know, he can play tomorrow too, because they got some big games coming up. They got Philadelphia, as of this recording, on a Tuesday evening, and then they also play Utah this upcoming Wednesday on the road, which, as we know, is not an easy environment, and that's a young team that's going to be hungry and want to win. So, and even though we got San Antonio on Friday, like, you know, you can't take any game lightly in the NBA. So, especially when you're in a position that they're in. So I'm honestly concerned about them more than I am the Warriors for that reason, because they got to get healthy and they got to do it fast, and they got to start finding some chemistry with one another. They got too much talent to just be playing around with the season like that. And if they're not careful, we had this conversation before about the Clippers about a couple months ago. If they're not careful, they could find themselves in a playing game with a team like we was talking about earlier, such as Oklahoma City, team that got nothing to lose, and all of a sudden, you playing for your playoff lives. And if it's any team who should know this better than anybody, it's the Clippers, because what happened last year? Lost to Minnesota. Then you had to play for the 8th and final seed in your building against the New Orleans Pelicans. And what happened? Paul George went down due to COVID. And you lost because you had no PG and no Kawhi. They better get back quick. But I want to move on to one of the final segments in our show prior to wrapping up this week's edition of Open Run. And that's part 2 of buyers and sellers. Last week, we discussed the Kings, Bulls, and the Suns, and whether or not we saw them being teams that would be looking to upgrade in an effort to compete for the Larry O'Brien Trophy, or wait until next year, as we are currently less than a month away from the NBA trade deadline. I want to start out this week with the New York Knicks, 25-21 record through the first 44 games, currently sit 6 overall in the Eastern Conference playoff picture, ranking the top 10 in offensive efficiency, 11th in defensive efficiency, tied with the Brooklyn Nets for second most road wins in the NBA as of this moment, winning 14 out of their 22 games away from home on the 2022-23 campaign. Julius Randle, Jalen Brunson, and RJ Barrett are all averaging at least 20 points per game or more. Randle's averaging a double-double, putting up close to 25 and 10. Are the Knicks buyers or sellers at this deadline to you?
Yeah, they're gonna do some buying. Because, you know, you already heard the rumors. They're trying to get rid of D-Rose. They're trying to get rid of guys that they know they can get some type of quality, whether it's draft pick or player competition for, knowing that, you know, those players aren't going to be playing on a roster when they could be playing somewhere else. And I think the rise of Grimes really just put D Rose out of the loop in that lineup, which is
Yeah.
a very surprising thing considering Taylor has rode with D Rose his whole career. But you know, time has come to move. You know that train is in. It's time, and it's time to get on the next train. So I expect D Rose to eventually get shipped somewhere. And I won't be surprised if they try to use D Rose as someone to be additional player for the bench, especially with that front court depth because they need that front court depth with the injury that Obi Toppin those guys have had. So I won't be surprised they go that route. But I think they have their biggest need that needed to be filled was with Jalen Brunson. They have a point guard now. So because they have a point guard, they're going to just build around everyone else and just make it work, which right now is working for the Knicks, considering that they're sixth in the East. But I think they're going to buy in a way to boost to the bench and maybe use Derrick Rose to get some front court help because that's something that they need, knowing that Obi Toppin isn't, a for sure scratch in when it comes to being healthy. And, you need to figure out how to move with Mitchell Robinson potentially getting in foul trouble.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Knicks are buyers. They've been playing too competitively not to be a buyer. And I could see them flipping Derrick Rose, not only potentially for a big man, but a wing if they can get it, because they need wing depth. And while Quentin Grimes has been great as a 3-and-D player as of late, like they have a roster where if someone goes down who's a impactful contributor, it can affect the whole show.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to get some front court pieces. I didn't think about a big man, but now that you mentioned that, yeah, that could be a possibility. But then if Mitchell gets into foul trouble, they do have Isaiah Hartenstein, who has really been great off the bench as a member of their second unit. So I think they'll be fine at the 5. But if they can get a 3, like a quality vet at the 3 for Derrick Rose, I think they take that. I think they take that with no issue, and I definitely see them being a buyer. But I want to move along from the team in the city that never sleeps to discuss the team that lies in the capital of the Sooner State. We talked about them a little bit earlier on the show, and that's the Oklahoma City Thunder. They currently sit with a 21-23 record, sit only just a half a game behind the Portland Trail Blazers for the 10th and final spot in the West playing picture as we sit during this recording talking about them. They stand 20th overall in offensive efficiency, but have managed to make their mark as a unit on the defensive end, ranking 10th overall in that department. Currently boast a 13-9 record at home, but stand with an 8-14 record on the road. But they managed to surprise many around the league, getting wins behind enemy lines, defeating the Sixers and Nets over the last several days. In addition to knocking off the C's out in OKC, SGA, he's proven to be the president of the council in OKC. He's ranking among the top 5 across the league and scoring with nearly 31 a game to go alongside a 5.5 assists. Josh Giddey been averaging 20 and 8 rebounds a game with 6 assists, shooting over 50% from the floor in his last 10 outings. This was an organization, man, as we said earlier. They was expected to be in the running for Victor Wembanyama or Scoot Henderson in the upcoming NBA draft this June. But they right on the outside looking in of the playoff picture right about now. We shared our thoughts already as to whether or not we think they're a legitimate play-in contender, rather, out west. Do you think that the Thunder are going to be buyers or sellers at the deadline?
I think they're going to just wait this thing out till next year. They ain't making any moves.
Okay.
I think they're waiting until next year. Stick to the program. You're already overachieving what many have thought around the league and probably what you thought within your own organization to achieve and believe. You're already doing above that. Continue to ride this wave. If you get to the play, that's great experience for this young group and a young core. You can use that going into next season, knowing you'll have Chet Holmgren. And based on where that draft is, because they have so many draft picks, you never know. They could be in that top 5 again and maybe be part of that Scoot Henderson or Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes. So, imagine having those twin cities like that in Oklahoma City with SGA. That's going to be something special to watch. So, having that with the playoff experience potentially under the belt, I say just ride the wave, man. Just let it go the rest of the season and come back next year looking stronger and improving on what you achieved this year.
I think they a team that's in the middle. I see them being a buyer, but a low buyer. I could also see them being a seller. A guy like Darius Baisley, he can help a contender. And some of these guys that they have on the roster, as great as they've been, all of them can't stick around. So they're going to have to get something in return for some of these young players that they have who might not fit into their core long term. And Darius Baisley is a guy that I think they could get, maybe a draft pick or something that's nice for them, like another young player in return that fits a need on that team better than he does. I mean, Chicago Bulls, you might want to give them a call about Baisley with the way he played against you. And he really doesn't even get that many minutes, but in the minutes in which he has had, he's been an impactful defender. Three ball has been up and down, but when he's, playing with confidence, he can shoot it well, at least from what he's shown through his first few years in the league. But I think they'll buy low. And if they do sell, they'll try and sell high on whatever assets that they do have. Mm-hmm. But the core, such as the Lou Dorts, the SGAs, the Josh Giddies, they're not for sale. But I'll move on from the 405 out to north of the border to talk on the Toronto Raptors. Currently tied with the Bulls for the 10th and final spot in the Eastern Conference play-in picture with a 20-24 record as of this recording, while they're facing off against the Bucks out in Milwaukee. Rank among the middle of the pack in both offensive and defensive efficiencies, sitting 14th and 13th overall, respectively, in both of those categories. They constructed a 14-11 record at home, but 6-13 on the road. They've lost a lot of close games this season on the road, even in spite of putting out a hard-fought overtime win against the Knicks at MSG on MLK Day. Pascal Siakam, he's leading the way with almost 26 points a night, nearly 8 rebounds, and nearly 7 assists per game, in spite of missing a couple of weeks earlier in the year due to a strained right groin injury suffered in Dallas. Gary Trent Jr., Scotty Barnes, OG Anunoby, as well as Fran VanVleet have also proven to be steady contributors as well for Toronto throughout the year under head coach Nick Nurse. There's been some rumblings going on around the league, man, including from Pelicans guard CJ McCollum, that Toronto is likely to be making some moves at the deadline on his self-titled podcast. Do you believe that the team in the 6 is a buyer or a seller?
Both.
Okay.
Both. Like, they're going to try to buy some stock to help create the core around Scotty Barnes. That's their future right now. And I think they're going to eventually build towards that. Now, with that being said, I think they're going to be sellers because Fred VanVleet turned down a contract extension.
Yeah.
So he's going at this point, he sets the free agency. If you want some capital back, knowing that you may not be able to retain him next season, you may want to look and get him rid of him and get at least some type of draft compensation or some young talent that can go with Scotty Barnes. Or you also got to look at Pascal Siakam too. He's been the face of your franchise for a while. You guys haven't gotten back at deep playoff run since Kawhi Leonard left. Does Toronto really think that Pascal Siakam is going to be the key at the face of the franchise to take him to that next level? I don't know the answer to that. And if Toronto does, considering that you might be considering trading Fred VanVleet, part of the rumors that's rumbling is they're looking at Miles Turner and DeAndre Ayton. That's money. They're all under the contracts except for Miles Turner. DeAndre Ayton got a max deal. You got to give us some type of bread to make that work. And and talent to go along with that. That means you're looking at either like a Fred VanVleet or OG Anunoby or a Pascal Siakam. So I think they're going to be doing both. They're not going to just get rid of guys that they know they can't retain, but they're going to try to bring in some guys that fit the direction of where the team may be going, which right now, although Pascal Siakam is there, the future is on Scottie Barnes' hands. And I think that's what they're going to prepare for moving forward.
I'm going to just be straight up. Toronto selling. They're going to sell for value. They're not just going to sell for pennies on the dollar, but they selling. And I think when they do, it's going to be very clear and evident that Scottie Barnes is the Raptors' face of the franchise. I've been hearing a lot of rumors about the Suns being linked to Pascal Siakam. I don't know how they make it happen. But when you look at the way that this team has underperformed as of lately, even in spite of the injuries to Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Cam Johnson, and several other key rotational pieces being in and out of the lineup, man, they're going to do something. I also read a report prior to us recording from Shams that the Suns and the Magic have inquired about Fred VanVleet.
Yep.
OG Anunoby has also been in constant trade talks and rumors. Yeah, to me, they selling. It's just clear as day. They have to be selling. I think Masai Ujiri is looking for some significant draft capital, and he's gonna build this thing around Scottie Barnes. I don't know who all gonna be around, but it's gonna be a couple of pieces and names that we brought up who, at the end of the day, I do believe will be traded. Gary Trent Jr. could easily be traded as well. Teams value 3-point shooting and defensive play on the wing. He provides that. Yeah, Toronto selling to me.
You could also argue too, Ujiri might be selling himself too.
Yeah.
Clear that deck. So for the new guy to come on in and say, guess what? I'm available.
That's true.
At this point, he's done. I think you can't do much more than what he's able to accomplish in Toronto. You can't get out of what that current roster has that that can bring you a title like Kawhi did, or even from a drafting perspective, give you what the DeMar DeRozan and the Kyle Lowrys did in their up and coming years. I think he's done what he could over there. And before even this past season, there were rumors of him linked to leaving, going to a team like the Washington Wizards to run the show. And if he signed that contract, extension, which I believe he did, they were going to trade for him. So I would not be surprised if after this offseason, he's clearing the deck now for that, so that way next season he could be traded too. That would not surprise me if those rumors came back up again and if there's some actual traction and truth to that.
I understand what you're talking about. I can see that as well, but I do believe, though, if he were to leave, and that's hypothetically speaking, he will leave them in a very good position, because if he's going to blow it up like that to where he would be willing to give up Pascal Siakam, that's going to cost some significant draft capital. And I do believe if he were to trade Pascal Siakam, he's going to get an emerging young player that he can at least pair Scottie Barnes with for the next several years north of the border. But I want to move away from buyers and sellers and talk about the top games this week across the association to watch out for in week 14 of the 2022-2023 NBA calendar. And for me, I got two for you. Thursday night, January 19th, finals rematch. Golden State at Boston, 6:30 p.m. Central Time, TNT. Stephen Curry erupted for 34 points en route to 6 triples to help Golden State capture its 4th title in the last 8 seasons in Game 6 of the NBA Finals last year in Boston. They returned to Boston to take on the team with the best record in all of basketball, the Boston Celtics. Last time these two teams met, it was on the second Saturday of December. Golden State mopped the floor with them out in San Francisco. Boston, they, like I said, they both the best record in basketball. Can they find a way to make a statement against the reigning champs who have struggled mightily this year on the road, as me and Josh have been talking about on this show? We got to find that out. And then another game, Saturday, January 21st, Philadelphia at Sacramento on NBA League Pass at 9 o'clock. Forget Netflix and chilling. As you have all summer to do that, this is the game to watch this week. You think that the big man has become extinct? This is a prime time bout on the West Coast that you need to stay up a tad late for and watch and see otherwise, as I know I'll be checking it out. This game is going to feature the reigning scoring champ, all-star center Joel Embiid, averaging 33.4 points per contest as of this recording, and is on pace to become the first center since Bob McAdoo to average at least 30 points for the second straight season. Going toe-to-toe against another fellow all-star and current league leader in rebounding with nearly 13 boards per night in Domantas Sabonis. Mind you, if you're a fan of elite point guard play, this game also got James Harden going up against De'Aaron Fox in a matchup that will feature two contrasting styles. One team in Philadelphia, they like to play slow. The other team in Sacramento, so they get the rebound, they pushing it. Sixers are currently 25th in pace this season. Kings are 5th in pace. Some got to give. But one thing I do know, them fans in California's capital city, they're going to have their cowbells ringing loud. It's going to probably be a sellout crowd, too, to watch their beloved squad take on one of the game's top squads right now at the Golden One Center. You definitely got to watch that. What's your top games to watch this week, Josh?
Man, I got 3 games, and they're all happening in one night.
Okay.
Friday, January 20th. You can start your evening off on League Pass when you watch the New Orleans Pelicans against the Orlando Magic. I got Zion Williamson go up against Paolo Banchero, my rookie of the year, with the way that he's been playing, especially when you compare him with his teammate Bol and the emergence of Markelle Fultz. Markelle Fultz has come around recently.
Yeah.
A lot of big ways. I want to see how that dynamic plays against the big 3, barely the big, at least the big 2 in CJ McCollum and Zion Williamson. So that's my first game. But the second game, you can kind of simultaneously flip back and forth between the game. I got to watch the Golden State Warriors against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Steph Curry against Darius Garland. Klay Thompson against Donovan Mitchell. You got Draymond against Evan Mobley. You got Jared Allen in the back against Kevin Looney. You got Kevin Love coming off the bench. I mean, what it do, baby? That's a nightmare full of matchups to watch, man. So that's definitely another game I'm going to watch. But the final one, you just got done talking about the Sacramento Kings. Sacramento Kings play against the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah.
I got to watch SGA go against De'Aaron Fox. Now, I'm talking about a point guard matchup that's for the running. Oh, man. That's going to be epic right there. Young team against young team. Both living up to higher expectations. I want to see how this team matches, how both those teams match up, considering you never know. If both of those teams continue to improve, they could be playing against each other in the Western Conference playoff race. You don't know. But it's definitely a possibility. Here's a nice little sneak peek for you right there, happening on League Pass at the final game of Friday night, 9 o'clock Central Time.
Yeah, I like that OKC Sacramento game. I caught that one too. I almost went with it, but I know the Kentucky fans will be watching that one. See SGA going up against De'Aaron Fox in that point guard showdown between the two former lottery picks and guys that really might be the top guards to get selected among the reserves out west. Yep. Spots are going to be hard to come by, as we know, because there's going to be some guys that get slighted. I will hope it's not them too. I really will hope that it's not them too. But with all that said, I'd like to thank everyone who took out the time to either tune in or listen in to this week's edition of Open Run presented by War Media. Please make sure to follow the YouTube channel at War Media Vids, where you can check out not only previous episodes of our show, but also our good friend and producer of the show, Saul Rodriguez, assessing which given directions the Bears should go in with the #1 overall pick in the draft this upcoming April, as well as all of the action set to take place in this year's NFL playoffs, including tuning in to the content available over on Instagram at War Media, where you can follow the moves as well. You can also make sure to subscribe to the Substack page also at warmedia.substack.com to follow written content from those part of the platform, such as my man Josh and others, as it's definitely appreciated. For myself, Gabriel Wilkins, and my co-host Josh Hicks. So long, everybody.